What I'm going to talk about tonight is the hate speech legislation that was rushed through the Parliament in record time. 1 hour of debate was allowed for this in our Australian Senate. So we've got 76 senators. I think that works out to 50-something seconds each that they could have debated this legislation, which changes the way about free speech is affected in Australia. Now, firstly, the image behind me could be something that is happening right now. Because in this country, if you are posting something online and you infringe this legislation, you can face up to 7 years in jail. So I'll just go through this at the start. This is the legislation here, Crimes Code Amendment, Hate Crimes Bill of 2025. So we already have a Crimes Code Act, so this legislation actually amends an existing act. That's why they call it in this way. Okay, next one. Now, one of the most major changes of this legislation is what we've got here, paragraph 3. And what it does, previously you had to intend to cause harm. You had to intend to threaten violence. They've changed that, and it's now just reckless. So you can say something with no intent to cause anyone harm, but under this new legislation they say, well, you said that recklessly. Therefore, you can be caught by this legislation. Intent is not required. Next one. Now, there's 2 sections to the Act. One has a 7-year jail sentence. The other one has a 5-year jail sentence. The only difference is this paragraph D, right? If the threat, if carried out, will threaten the peace, order and good government of Australia. So if whatever you say breaks these other ones and also threatens the peace, order and good government of Australia, whatever that means, it's an extra 2 years in jail. Okay, let's go next one. I'll go through the specifics of the legislation. Okay. I'll go through this one, okay. Threatening force or violence against groups, right? Paragraph 1. A person commits an offence if the person threatens to use force or violence against a group. Now, the first thing there, it's not just violence. It's not just physical violence. They've included the use of force. Now, force can be moral force. It can be intellectual force. It can be all types of force. It doesn't necessarily have to be physical force. So they've greatly broadened the definition of rather than just physical violence to include force. Okay. Paragraph B. The targeted group is distinguished. Now, previously what we had under Section 18C, we had it was based upon race. That was what it was restricted to. Now it's only it's race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, intersex status, disability, nationality, national or ethnic origin, or political opinion. So if you are a group that has a political opinion, whatever that may be, you are now one of the protected categories. If you are also someone of gender identity, where you may think that men should be able to use women's toilets, this now covers also gender identity in the legislation. Right? Paragraph C. A reasonable member of the targeted group, so that's all these groups here. So a group with a political opinion, which could be even our people here, we are now one of those groups at the target, okay? So one reasonable member of the targeted group would fear that the threat would be carried out. So it doesn't matter if the threat actually happens or whether you meant it. It just needs one person from that group to say, I fear that might have happened to you. And that's it. Bottom one here, that only applies, that gives you an extra 2 years of jail. That's the legislation. So this is very broad. We don't know how this is going to be interpreted by the courts. But this becomes a major impediment to free speech because it's going to frighten people from speaking out. There's also the provision that applies to causing damage or destruction of real property. So again, if you say something, right, which threatens, or they say threatens the destruction of real property, I could say, very well say, I think those bloody great windmills should be torn down. I'm actually coming under this one here because I'm advocating the use of damage or the destruction of real property. Absolutely, I want those wind turbines ripped down. That catches me. And again, you've only got to get one person in those protected groups to fear that would happen. And again, you're in breach of the legislation. 5 years as it is, or 7 years. There's one question here.
Do these rules apply to the Free Palestine group?
They apply to everybody. This is a big important point. We don't know actually how these are going to be interpreted and how they will be policed. We've seen in the UK how these laws, we have this two-tier policing. Next one. Now, what could be an example of someone breaching this act? This is an old newspaper article from the 50s. It says, this is Sir Robert Menzies. 4,000 people cheered wildly rehearsal tonight when Mr. R.G. Menzies, the opposition, said, and quote, "We are going to declare war on the communists. We are going to give them a thrashing." Now let's go through the legislation. Threatens to use force or violence against a group. Well, Sir Robert, you threaten you're going to give the communists a thrashing. We come down here, the communist says they're a group of political opinion, distinguished, okay, the targeted group is distinguished by political opinion. Yes, the communists, right? Is a reasonable member of the targeted group, the communists, would fear that the threat would be carried out. Well, sorry, this Menzies going to give us a thrashing, or he's going to kick us out of the country, right? You are now in breach of the Act. So what Sir Robert Menzies said here back in the 50s, I would argue, clearly breaches the provisions of this new law, which would send Menzies to jail for 5 years. This is the insanity of this legislation. Remember, an hour's debate in the Senate, and the One Nation members abstained instead of voting against this. Next one. And this will all be policed, of course, by our great friend, the E-Safety Commissioner. And this is just not one standalone piece of legislation. This ties in to the Digital ID Bill, and it ties into the Age Verification Bill. And just think about this. So the Age Verification Bill will mean that sometime this year, before anyone logs onto their social media account, you'll have to have some form of digital ID to prove that you're over 16 years of age. So the result of this is everyone that logs on or makes a comment on social media, they'll have your digital ID, they'll know exactly who you are. And if you say something that's in breach of those previous acts, they can come after you. So there's no more anonymity posting comments, political comments on social media under these combined acts. Remember, that's the Digital ID Bill, which is so that combines with this one. So it's all, if when you put one bill by itself, people say, oh, that's not too bad. You put all three together, they're creating a digital police state that will monitor everything we say and suppress freedom of speech and argument in this country. So this is the future we've got under this bill. We'll have police officers looking and going through and trolling the internet, looking for breaches of this act, to come and give you a knock on the door in the middle of the night with a potential jail sentence of 5 to 7 years. We all remember this mother here during the COVID, pregnant, 2 young children, posted something on Facebook that simply said a protest against Dan Andrews, a protest that was lawful because she was living in Ballarat. At that time, protests in Ballarat were lawful. She advertised a protest in Ballarat, and they came around early in the morning to put her in handcuffs in her own house in front of her own children. A great quote from Sir Winston Churchill. One of the most important signs of the existence of a democracy is that when there is a knock at the door at 5 a.m. in the morning, and one is completely certain it is the milkman. That's no longer the country that we live in. That knock on the door at 5 o'clock in the morning, if you are posting political comments to social media, could be the police, because you could be in breach of this new hate speech legislation. And not that we want hate speech, but the best way to defeat these bad ideas is often through comedy and laughing and mocking people. I grew up watching Hogan's Heroes. And we used to, one of the other things in this legislation, if you put your arm up at a certain angle, it's a compulsory jail sentence of a year. Now, when I was at school, we used to sort of, if someone made some like over totalitarian remark, like a teacher, we used to put our finger up over our lips to mimic Hitler's moustache and then do the Nazi salute. Because we were using that Nazi salute to mock and ridicule. And it was always anyone that put a Nazi salute up was just viewed as a complete moron or a complete idiot. Now, by making this a criminal offence, what we've done is we're going to create martyrs in our society. And these people, and you know, if you can't do it, well, why is the government not allowing you to do it? There must be something wrong. It has the exact reverse, outcome than what we actually want as a society. And this happens with so much of government legislation. We see the exact opposite of what they are trying to do. The best way to tackle hate speech is more speech, freedom of speech. Let's flush these people out. Let's debate their ideas. If you allow them to, they know these hate speech. If you allow these comments and this hate speech, it just goes under the rug, it festers, and we don't tackle it, and we don't get to the root of the problem. So with the hate speech legislation, there's also a provision upon hateful symbols. So here's my symbol to the Liberal and Labor Party members that decided that they passed this legislation through our country. As part of the Libertarian Party, we have made a pledge that we will repeal this legislation. That would be one of the first, if we get Libertarian senators into that new Senate, that would be one of our very first acts to put a bill into the Parliament to repeal that legislation in full. And I think it is a great shame that the Liberal Party that I once joined, the party of Sir Robert Menzies, sat in that Parliament and voted for that legislation and voted for it to be guillotined through in less than an hour. So, please, I'm going to put this up on my social media, share it with you, let people know what is being done and is being doing to our country. We've got to fight back against this. We've got to stop. We've got to have a country where we value free speech. I know one of the other policies that John will talk about is going to bring to the Parliament also a referendum, a bill to have a referendum to enshrine free speech in our Constitution the same as they do in the US. Because such laws in the US would never see light of day because of their First Amendment. And the reason they made the First Amendment in the USA is because from freedom of speech, all other freedoms flow. Thank you very much.